On August 12, 2005, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. He was 2 pounds, 2 ounces, but he was 32 weeks along in pregnancy. He was not a normal delivery. The day before I had him, I was told that he did not have a heartbeat and that he was already dead. The next day, I go from having no pains whatsoever to extreme labor that lasted for 3 hours, and my water had broke beforehand. My water had broke a couple days beforehand, and then it was a dry birth, so it was a dry birth. And because he had died before he was able to turn, he was coming out feet first. He made, because of this, he did the splits coming out, so only 1 foot came out at a time, and it would cost me some serious damage if I continued to give birth to him. So they had to shove him back in to the canal and start all over with the pushing and everything. And labor is very hard for anybody, can have some difficulties for anybody, but when you're giving birth and you know that he's not going to come out and cry, and you're not going to ever see him grow up, never going to look in his eyes, it makes the labor even harder. 4 days later, I buried my son, and then I went and got all the paperwork that dealt with him. When I went through the paperwork, I found there was a death certificate, but there was no birth certificate. So I went to the records office and I inquired how I could get a birth certificate. They informed me that it was illegal in the state of Indiana to receive a birth certificate for a child that's stillborn. They said because my son did not take 1 breath, that he was not ever alive. So that I never gave birth to him. All that pain for that birth, and I did not give birth to him. There was another lady by the name of Joanne Casador that lived in Arizona that had a stillborn as well. And she felt the same way I did, that it wasn't right that we got a death certificate but no birth certificate. So she founded an organization called the Miss Foundation and created a bill called the Missing Angel Bill. This bill was introduced to legislation in order to allow parents like her and I to receive a birth certificate for our children. Many of the people who are fighting against this bill believe it's just to use it as a scam, or, you know, for no reason whatsoever, just for abortion, to fight on abortion laws. That is not the case. With our children, we constantly see death. My child, his grave, the things we put on the grave, that's all we see is death. There's no validation that he was ever alive. And that's all that we're asking for. And that's what the Missing Angel Bill would allow us to do. As of today, well, she did get it passed in Arizona in 2001 and received her certificate of birth shortly after that. And since then, there has been 27 states that have passed, including Indiana. There are 18 states that don't even have a bill. The goal for this foundation, and all of us, is to allow every parent who has ever went through the tragedy of burying their children the opportunity to prove that they were alive. I got to hold my son. You cannot tell me that that was not a live child at one time. I felt him kicking. I felt him moving. I heard his heartbeat. But yet this state still wanted to not accept that he was ever alive. In Indiana, our law passed in 2002. You cannot receive a birth certificate of birth in stillborn, or CBRS, without actually specifying that you want one of those. When I went into the records office, I was told that there was nothing. Because I did not say what it was, they just said there's nothing. So I think that the law should be that you should be informed of it at least, so that you can make the decision on whether you want one or not. When I went back after I found out about the CBRS, they told me that nobody in the office knew how to make one. So they didn't know how I could go about getting one. And that was the end of it. So even though this bill has been passed, it needs to be tweaked a little bit so that it includes these other families as well. All that these families are wanting and needing is validation. So if you are one of those members of our community that has lost a child or is buried due to stillborn, or has a family member that has, please inform them of the CVRS. I've gone 5 years now without having one, and it would have made the transition of getting from, you know, the pain over the pain so much more easier if I would have just had somebody validating that my son was alive instead of everything being thrown at me that he is dead. Any questions?